I'm Joyce, and together with my colleagues, we run the StackX DevRel work here in GovTech. So before we start, we would like to run through a couple of house rules that are up on screen now. So first, please note that this webinar is being recorded. We ask that your questions be kept to the topic presented today to keep the session meaningful. Finally, please feel free to ask us questions throughout the webinar. So for the first two presentations, we will have a short Q&A after each speaker. You can use the Zoom raise hand function, and our team will actually come on and unmute you. So, for both lightning talks, you can plonk your questions in the Zoom Q&A panel below, and then we will address those during the open mic session as well. So the focus of today's session is on UX UI design, as I'm sure everyone knows, both from the public and industry perspectives. So Eong, our Director for Digital Design and Development here in GovTech, will kick the meet off with a great introduction on how we engage the wider community with strategic national projects, as well as some exciting opportunities. And both sharing sessions by Fala and Sean will be followed by a quick Q&A where you can verbalize your questions. During the next two lightning talks, like what I mentioned, feel free to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A panel, and then we can have a discussion on that during the open mic. So here's just a very quick intro on us for our new attendees. GovTech is more than 3,000 strong now, and our work can be broadly classified into the three areas that you see on screen. So for products, we have over 700 developers who implement products for the whole of government and develop strategic national projects. We also have capability centers in digital services, sensors and IoT, data science and AI, cybersecurity, and infrastructure. So the products team manages the WOG, or whole of government infrastructure, from our move to commercial cloud, to data centers, to the issuance of devices for all public officers. Next, the services group is actually the biggest of three, making up more than half of our strength. So they play an important role in managing technology in over 60% of government agencies in Singapore. And last but not least, cyber and governance. So GovTech is actually the sector lead for cybersecurity in the government, and the Chief Information Security Officer sits in GovTech. So to ensure that all the work we do is safe and secure, our governance group sets the ICT policies and guidelines across the government. And so to engage and connect with designers and techies like yourselves here, GovTech formed the StackX community in 2019. So if you have not joined yet, please scan the QR code on the screen. I'll also be sharing the link that you can join should you wish to. Yeah. And so basically in StackX Meetup, we share latest info on deep dive StackX sessions with the public sector and industry professionals. In fact, we'll be organizing a comprehensive StackX conference for cloud next month, this November. So updates on this event, as well as all of our upcoming meetups, will be shared with our community members via StackX Meetup and the Telegram group that you can join. So these are great ways to stay informed. And the Singapore Government Developer Portal, or what we fondly refer to as Dev Portal, is a one-stop resource hub for digital transformation. So you can discover a wide range of content covering guidelines, technologies, technical documentation, and communities. So examples of content that will empower you in your digital transformation projects include our newly updated Digital Service Standards, or DSS article. You can also visit the community page for details of past webinars and blogs by GovTech teams. As always, you can scan the QR code or visit the page here for more info. So in terms of Dev Portal content that is directly applicable for UX designers, we have 3 articles. The UX design page provides an overview of UX design and introduces readers to different UX domains and types of specialists to recruit into your UX team. 2 other applicable articles are on DSS and the Singapore Government Design System, or SGDS. So a lot of acronyms there, but the DSS provides best practice guidelines for designing government digital services and conducting usability checks, whereas the SGDS is a design framework and guideline that provides a common UI language and user experience for government services. So I'm also going to share the links to these articles that you can find on the Dev Portal for more info. So during this period, we are also continuing our support for the tech community, and we have close to 400 positions available for contract and perm. So you should be able to find some interesting roles. And if you know of any friends who may be keen, please also share this with them. Yep. And finally, let's welcome Sarah, who will share more on today's session.
Okay, hi everyone. I think, can you guys see me? Is my video up? Yes, right? Okay. Yeah, nice to meet all of you. I might already know some of you before this. I'm based in San Francisco, mostly out here talking to Singaporeans in tech in across the whole of US. So if I haven't got in contact with you yet, definitely do reach out, or I'll be reaching out to you across LinkedIn at some point. Don't get a shock. I focus around building communities, so making sure that people are connected as they need it, or just for getting to know more Singaporeans across the US as well, across your different domains. So I work very closely with Singapore Global Network, so you'll see me at some events as well, but definitely more than happy to chat at any point. And then also covering any openings like Joyce just mentioned around hiring, mentorships and fellowships, and basically helping to connect expertise back to the public sector. So yeah, definitely reach out if you're interested. I'll drop my LinkedIn into the chat in a bit. And yeah, looking forward to meet all of you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. Now may we have Eong to share what GovTech is doing for UX UI design. Eong, please.
Hello, everyone. Eong here. So I think just the slide has mentioned, I don't have any slides, right? Supposed to kick off this session. Very honored to do that. A bit of introduction to myself. Yeah, I happen to be the director of this DD. So can I start with a lame joke? So that's why a lot of people call me DDDD. Sorry if you have heard this joke before. So anyway, I think today the focus is really about to give a broad introduction of who we are and what we are doing here in the government. So typically, if I try to really group the kind of things that we do in the government, right, they are majorly they are in major 4 different groups. So the first group will be something we call it. Sorry about the big name. There are a lot of big names here, but essentially I will explain what does it really mean, which is more important. First group is called the Strategic National Project. Right, things like, if you heard about things like Go Business, which is supposed to be a holistic, consolidated portal for the business to solve all kinds of different needs, right? And for the individual, we also have things like, for example, last time we called it Moments of Life, but now we call it Life SG. So there is a big user research behind. So for example, when we try to do a research on a typical Singaporean, when your kid first born, all the way until the kid go into, let's say, primary 1, in fact, on average, a citizen needs to interact with 8 different agencies and more than 10 digital services. So it's really about how do we dream again, right? Remap out, revisioning all how the digital service work. It can be a lot of silo work at the back, but it doesn't matter as long as at the front, we want to streamline the kind of journey for the citizens. So there are quite a few important numbers come out. For example, 200 plus field reduced into 50 field. You need to interact with 8 different agencies, but we just let you interact with 2 different agencies, that kind of thing. So that is what really separate us from any of the private entity, in the sense that they are certain things that designer at the central government are supposed to do. So that's the first group of things that we do. Second group of things is something that I think you probably have read at many places, right? One of the very important government strategy is really this thing about tech stack. Now, don't misunderstood that tech stack is only relevant to the engineer, because tech stack could also means that as a designer, when you bake in certain good design principle into the stack itself, and when this tech stack is being used by multiple touch points, that is how actually your impact got to scale up. So things like, for example, I'm not sure whether you're aware, even for designer, I think these days more and more we talk about design through data, right? So we have more than 3,000 digital touchpoints in the country, serving all level of citizens, business, and stuff like that. But then all of them at the back, there's only one analytics tool, and that is, we call it a WOGA, right? But it is not just analytic tools. From the WOGA, from analytics tool, we also come up with things like we after we do user research, we say that uptime is important. So we add in uptime into it. After that, when we interact with some other community, right, we learned that actually a lot of the designer engineer, they go and use Google Lighthouse, for example, right? Not standing behind any brand name, but just an example, right? So then we will try to integrate Google Lighthouse in. So that all in all, we build a tech stack so that for any single agencies, when they need, when they stand up any of the digital product, within 49 minutes, they are able to just add in 2 lines of JavaScript code. Why 49 minutes? That's what they told us, right? If it's an in-house project, of course, it can be more. It's just 2 lines of JavaScript code, right? Then all these things are actually at their work. Something that quite interesting also in the recent attempt is also, we also try to stood up a small tech stack, which is really about a case management stack, very lightweighted, so that when the COVID comes, we can really quickly deploy the tech stack in the various occasions. So it's on that note, I'm also very happy to say that, just through the COVID period, when we stood up this Gather SG tech stack, you can search gather.gov.sg, is there are public information there. We stood up and to do assisted living, right, on the vulnerable seniors who are staying alone. And I'm happy to say that even just during this COVID period, we handled about around 400 life-threatening cases. So, okay, I shall not be too smoky, but then I think it's not too smoky to say that we probably save a few hundreds of lives there, right? And of course, the other tech stack is GoWare that you probably heard about, right? Has been reused in 14 different national distribution ops. When COVID come, distribute masks, distribute sanitizer, and so on and so forth. So that is the part of tech stack. The group number 3 is really the agency project, where GovTech work with certain agency project to work out certain things. Now, there is one thing that I thought will be quite interesting, especially to the overseas community. I don't know how many of you are from overseas, but just this Monday, just 2 days back, because we received some comment from the overseas community. So they say that, hey, now it's super troublesome, super mahan, because when I lost passport, especially before the COVID situation, you do need to relocate overseas, but Singaporeans like to travel overseas, right? Then they lost passport and so on and so forth. And so much so that it became an issue, because when you lost passport in overseas, and if we do not have the digital services to make certain digital service online presence for overseas community, that become an issue. Sometimes they told us that they have to travel across the state just to get the public. And sometimes when they lost the passport, it's the whole family lost the passport together. So all those things are being surfaced in the user research. And that is how I'm happy to say that since Monday, now you have a lost passport digital service online, which is very relevant to the overseas community. And of course, it's also under this group of agency project cluster that we go deep into the social sector. So our presence in social sector is tremendous, partly because there is a need from social sector, partly also because that is where the passion of a lot of the designer is at, right? Last bit, the 4th cluster is really because we're in COVID situation, so it's really in the COVID track. Now, later, I think my teammate are going to share about the support GoWare, which is essentially really a ground up. The very interesting bit about that is that it's a ground up initiative. It's not a top down initiative, right? But we are very happy to say that a few months back, when we go into some governance platform and stuff like that, we managed to transform this ground up effort. Now it will become a one-stop social service portal, and I'll let my colleague share more. Of course, the other thing probably the community probably know better is Trace Together, because we, in fact, more than the community, everyone is familiar with it. And what interesting thing behind, which probably most people doesn't know, is that there is also a big community. It is actually UX designer, engineer, and more, right? Which whether they like TT, whether they hate TT, it doesn't matter. But then there is a community that, in fact, the group is keep on growing in the Telegram or Slack, right? And they continuously provide feedback and so on and so forth there. So I think I want to end off my very quick kickoff introduction with this part but to support all the 4 pillars that I mentioned: strategic national project, tech stack, agency project, COVID track. I think all in all, it's really about the people, right? If there is no good people, there's nothing much we can do about it. So I think this one I have to sell Koyo a bit lah. So I think as GovTech, I think we also put in a lot of effort, right? Other than the typical training opportunity. Something that actually quite exciting to me is that recently we start to attach people up to the companies, right? To really, because what is in my mind is that if the best way for for designers to learn the best from the industry is for them to leave the team and join the industry. Then I thought it's quite sad lah. We have never done enough, right? So in GovTech, we have this thing called DTech program, which is totally supported by management, HR colleagues, right? So I just have one, that one is PM, came back from VMware. And then now we are also attaching more designer. In fact, we're attaching 2 designers out this year. At least that is what we have put up. So that's all we do, and hope, I'm rushing because I only have 5 minutes, but then hope at least you get a better sense of who we are and why are we here, right? Okay, I'm going to leave off here, and I'm going to paste my LinkedIn link into the chat itself. Thank you and have a nice day. Enjoy StackX.
Thanks, Eong. Sorry, we only gave you 5 minutes.
No.
Okay, so now we would like to welcome Fala, who will talk about Support Go Where and how the team has grown it from a ground-up initiative to what it is today. Fala, the floor is yours.
Hi everybody. Good morning and good evening. So let me go to share my screen. All right. Okay, so yeah, I'm Fala. I'm a UX designer in DCube. So let's start. Just a bit of a background about myself. I did a bit of games and did a bit of front-end dev and a bit of project manager role. And then I decided to jump into UX, and that is where I am right now. I've been in GDS for almost 4 years. Yeah, so what I like about my work is actually like writing research plans and guides. I love writing questions to ask our users. Also trying to find ways to make things better. That's why I've decided to start this ground out initiative, which is the Support Go Where, to try to change what it is right now in the social sector. Of course, chatting with my colleagues. We always can't run away with chatting with colleagues. And lastly, I really need a vacation. Hey, Young. No lah, it's because yeah, COVID, we're just staying at home, right? So dreaming about going overseas is very important for my mental health. All right, so today's agenda, I'll do a bit of a brief history of Support Go Where, and then we focus more on like what's the new stuff on Support Go Where, what's our vision, and some of the key consideration that we have in terms of UX wise, and what other problems that we are trying to solve that is coming up in the future. Okay, first off, a bit of history. Won't take so much time on this. So this is what it looks like when we first started. So it's really, like we mentioned before, it's a ground-up initiative. We quickly come up with the design. The design is based on the Go Where series. And then we find all the information that we need and we launch it within 1 week. So it was, yeah, it was really something that you have never thought that a government sector would like be able to do it, right? Because previously I'm from private sector, so maybe we do things like a bit differently. So being able to push this out within 1 week is really something that I never thought of when I joined the public sector. Yeah, all right. What is key thing on this website is the eligibility checker. So we have like many schemes out there, and there's of course when it comes to social schemes, there's always criteria, right? So that gives some sort of like a friction or like a barrier for someone to go forward and find this services, these schemes, I mean. So eligibility checkers sort of help them streamline what exactly the scheme that is right for them. All right, that's just a short brief. So now we don't really have much COVID-19 schemes already, so we want to move on to the next part of Support Go Where, which is mostly focusing on social assistance schemes for now. This is how it looks like. We just relaunched the UI, the new screen in September. And then we added the new categories in October. So you can see that we work in Agile. So that's why we have, we release short once in a while, like September, October. And then maybe not sure when it's coming up, but we have a few things coming up. So that's in line for Support GoWare. So our vision now is to be an online concierge for social assistant for citizens to find, apply, and check status of social schemes and services, thus minimizing the need to visit agencies in person. It really helps for a citizen, right? If they have an online to submit document, they don't need to go back and forth to a physical location to submit their documents. So we have heard a few stories where citizens have to go back and forth just to submit a few documents that they are missing out on. So we're trying to minimize that. And also if you are able to give the citizen a chance to do it online on themselves, it also helps on our end for the officers on the ground, right, to sort of focus on what is the more crucial social need rather than the simple thing of filling up a form. Or if it's that simple, then it should be, be online. Or if, yeah, that would be ideal. Yeah. Some key screens for current Support GoWare. The first one is our homepage. We have our eligibility checker right on top, because after a few rounds of usability testing, realized that most of our users are missing out on this eligibility checker. After they try it, then they realize, hey, I should have done this much earlier, so I'll know like which scheme is for me. So we bring up that UI up more upfront, and then we list some of our most of our schemes on the categories by categories. So it's easier for one to look through, because right now we only have like 48 schemes, but in the future we'll be adding more, like a few hundreds. So that will change a bit of our IA as well. But right now, this is what it is for now. Yeah, and the last screen is the application page. Of course, we have, if you have to sign up, if you log in with SingPass, and then you can use My Info Data, so you don't need to fill up all the form fields. Okay, then focus a bit more on UX now. We mentioned that UX is it's a broad spectrum, right? In UX, we do research on our users, we do a bit of information architecture, we do a bit of our user interface, and also we go on into right now, which is UX writing as well. So it's not just like how things flow from one page to another, but it's really sounds like everything, like everything of the website we do from end to end. So it's not just like we are just UI designers. So we do really end-to-end stuff. Okay, let's focus on understanding our users. What we have a problem is how might we know the search process of social assistants so that it can inform us in our product strategy. So right now, when we think about how do our users come to our website, or maybe don't think about our site at all, think about how users search for social assistant out there. Do they do word of mouth, or do they just quickly do a Google search? Or maybe they see a poster at their leaf landing. And also right now, we don't really have a clue on the right data on how users are searching for social assistant. That's why we tried a few ways. We look at some of Google Trends. We search by the keywords and see what are trends out there. And of course, Woga, which is our tech stack. We use Woga to check on Support GoWare device and browser types and the user sentiments. And of course, for UX, we always do contextual inquiries with our users. So we are currently doing some interviews with citizens and social service agencies to find out really the search process. We also handing out surveys, quick surveys, just to boost up our research. Yeah, just something I found on Google Trends. This is when I search on GST vouchers. So when I look at GST voucher, there's a spike within this period. I think this period is when you are allowed to log in and sort of sign up or something along that line. So there's a spike. So a lot of people going to searching for GST vouchers and all the related queries that is relevant to it. And I highlighted the eligibility. So this gives us an impression that eligibility is really something that people think about when they have looking for social assistance. Yeah, and some of the keywords that they use, we know that having the term itself is, of course, it's important, and also, of course, the year, and then we have a payout date as well. So these are a few things that that captures our attention. For WOGA, this is from September numbers. I took the September numbers. So you can see that most of our users are from mobile. So it gives us, when we create, of course, we are doing a responsive website, right? But then we have to focus on the mobile, and then we see and make sure that the UI for the mobile is really optimized. And then when you look into sentiments, some users gave us more comments. Like good comments we found is they find the eligibility checker, which is simple and easy to understand and user-friendly. Questions are precise and easy to answer. These are really helpful in terms of our work, so that we can see how to improve our website even better, right? Yeah, one thing I found was someone said that the old interface was better because he could control F on to search for grants. So then we are thinking, oh yeah, there's something that we need to improve on, maybe in the next batch of updates. Next up is the categories. So now we have a lot of schemes on board. How do we group these schemes? Some of the consideration that we have, that we know that one scheme can be in multiple categories. Then we also need to balance the number of categories and with schemes. So we wouldn't create one category just for one scheme. And then to expand the usage of the categories into our upcoming services that will be added on, and maybe look into potential of subcategories. What we did was we did a card sorting with our users. So first we did the open card sort, where we list down, we just list down the whole scheme and then ask them to put a category to these schemes. And then after that, we did a hybrid card sort, where we decided on the few categories, then ask them to put a scheme onto the categories, and also for them to add on any categories that they think would be much more relevant than what we have right now. Okay, so yeah, so it's true that one scheme can be up to like 3 categories, because we categorize based on topics and also by audience. So it can be like healthcare and for seniors. So it's in 2. The next one is our eligibility checker, which is a very crucial tool on our website. We need to balance, really, when you create this kind of questions, we need to balance on like the amount of questions that you have versus the amount of schemes that you have as well. The more questions you have, of course, you get refined results, but then you have too many questions, you will have a lot of drop-off rate. And then, so we try to squeeze in some conditional logic in our questionnaire. And of course, we, again, same like the categories, right? We don't fret the little details. Like we don't create a question just to fit one scheme. Yeah. So that's our consideration for eligibility checker. Some of the common questions we have for almost all schemes, right, will be citizenship, year of birth, household income per capita, type of housing and ownership, employment status. So I just asterisk some of them, year of birth previously. Some of the schemes are using exact dates. So we might think we might change that in the future, but we're not sure yet. Household income per capita, right now is for the whole household, but we still have some feedback saying that it is sort of unfair to look into the whole household income when the person applying is an individual person. So it's something, it's not a UX problem, but it's sort of something that it can address. We need to address it with the business stakeholders on it. yeah, we will need to, a good thing about our UX is we just don't do just our UX, we will do, when we have certain thought like this, we'll push it to, there's also future things like how can we do some process change so we can make the citizens' life much easier. And for example, the type of housing and ownership, previously we've been asking the annual value of the property, but most of our users said, I don't know what's my annual value, I don't own the house, I cannot check on IRAS. So then we'll switch things a bit, and then we say, oh, maybe we just ask about housing information, and maybe that will be much easier. But it's something that we're still trying to push to the business stakeholders on changing that idea. Okay, yeah, just moving on to now back to UI. So then when we have all this information, right, what are we going to show to users? We have so many things to say, but users have only short period of attention span, right? So, and then some consideration when we look into schemes, we know that not all schemes are monetary. So we need to have a space for that in our UI. And then we need to balance, do people look into benefits value, or do people look into the keywords so that they can find the right scheme and then move forward from there. And especially for GoWare series, our website are all multi-language. So we do need to have translation. So we have Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. So then we need to think about the UI space, right? The space, we know that Mandarin will be a lot more shorter than if you compare it to Malay and Tamil. So we need to balance that, and also not to overload users on the information. It's just enough for them to know so that they can move forward, whether it's application or whether it's just to read more on it. Yeah, and of course with UI, there's always visual hierarchy. So this is how we evolve from our scheme card. First, we have the benefits, right? And then when we do our user testing, we realize that, oh, some have values and some don't have values. So how do we streamline this? And if we have a lot more schemes, how do we categorize this? So we have a category icon, you have some description, and then we still try again, we iterate again, maybe a description with some monetary value, and then how is it like? But we end up with this right now. We de-emphasize the category icons. So we just focus on the title, a bit of description, and the keywords. So the keywords help to facilitate quick evaluation of the schemes. And then for our description, we like I will speak about it later in the UX writing, we talk about the target audience. We include the target audience and a little bit information about the benefit. So we don't do the monetary value UI in the card, we put it in our description. This is how it looks like with our multi-language support. Yeah, so as you can see, for Mandarin it's a lot shorter because of the characters, but for Malay and Tamil is a lot longer. All right, I think this is the last one. So how we manage the copy of our website so that we be consistent in our message and our tone of voice. So we have a UX writer. She'll help us to create our content guideline. So then whenever we have new schemes, we always follow the same flow of description. There's always, like I mentioned, there's always the target audience, and we set a bit of a brief on the benefit in that description. So when users read it, they really got the gist of it, and then they can know whether they want to move on to apply or to read more, or they can just skip through it. Again, tone of voice. Of course, we are a social assistant website, right? So our tone of voice is really important. And then we have common vocab, like we usually have like, oh, you get a one-time payment of something, one time. So there's different agency might give us different ways to describe it. So then we streamline it and just say there's no one-off of everything. We just say that it's a one-time payment. And if there's a monetary value that is 200 per month, we don't do like 200/months. We just type it out 200 per month. And of course, we are focusing more on inclusivity. So we look into the inclusive language, we don't call the disabled, right? It's not right. So we call them people with disabilities. Another one would be like, we don't do like click here for more, because we know like not everyone is clicking, right? So these are the things that we thought of. At the same time, when we do usability testing, right now we are expanding out and looking at citizens with disabilities as well. So then we'll get their inputs. So previously we were just like, oh, just get like 5 users to help us. But now we're trying to expand out so that, that our website will be inclusive. Yeah, so description that we get from the agencies, for example, it was like to honor and thank our pioneer generation for their hard work and dedication. When a user read it, they were like, yeah, is this for me or not for me? What can I do with it, right? So we change it. So we add the target audience and what is it actually is about. So we change it to for seniors born from when to when, and to help them with what? With her healthcare cost. And a simple thing like just a monthly cash payout. So it's not really descriptive. So we add for seniors to receive monthly cash withdrawals from their CPF account. So a bit more descriptive, but still targeted. I think this is last of my slides.
Thanks,
so
Farah. Yeah, I'm so sorry because we are running a little bit over. Yeah, so appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
So yeah, in the future, we have a lot of things coming for Cephalt GoWare. So a lot of problems to solve, like our services coming up, how do we handle large volumes of schemes, and how do we continue our efforts to be inclusive, and how, of course, back to how do we push for process change to the business stakeholders. All right, lastly, we are still hiring. So if you want to be part of our team, join us. We are looking for UX lead designers and UX writers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Farah. We do have a few questions, but I think that let's move that to the open mic session at the end of the meetup. So perhaps let me introduce Sean Jali now from Design Map, who will be speaking next on the evolving role of design. So Sean, you're up next. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everyone. Let's jump in. In today's talk, I will share perspectives on how design's role has evolved and speculate on how it will evolve into the future. I'll be the only one presenting today, but I just wanted to recognize that this talk was created by the both of us. And as I mentioned, I'm Sean, I'm principal designer, and we both work at Design Map, a digital product and service design consultancy based in San Francisco. Just to recognize our bias is that we tend to work with large companies in complex spaces that usually come to us to envision their future. And this talk actually originated when we saw a disparity between these benefits of design thinking, which really showed this was a much better way of designing products, to this statement from Natasha, right, who persuades designers otherwise. And her argument culminates to this screen from an IBM product, where she states there's nothing special with the design. And she's right? As an artifact, the design isn't that great. But there were so many compelling benefits from the stats that we saw earlier. So how is it that IBM and her are both right? And that's because they're defining design in different ways, right? Natasha was really talking about design as artifact, which is the thing itself, whereas the IBM was talking about design as process, working together with others. And this somewhat ridiculous statement from a design historian also includes two other definitions, right? Design as industry, a broader role in a company and society, and design as concept, the big ideas behind the thing we're crafting. So in this talk, I'll actually use this ridiculous statement or these 4 facets of design as a framework to discuss how the practice and responsibilities along each of these facets of design are evolving. So let's start with design as artifact, where we need to evolve from designing objects to designing interventions for ecosystems. As designers, we transition from shaping objects to shaping experiences, and now we're shaping services, especially in the hybrid approach of digital, physical, and social. I tend to work in quite a bit in the healthcare industry. So you will see, in the nurse in that healthcare context, the social interaction with a patient using a digital device, usually for data entry or data retrieval, in a physical space that's supposed to encourage this interaction. And all of these things are interconnected. And the concept of making is also changing, right? From a traditional design standpoint, Google Smart Compose has very little designs. And those words are not even decided by a designer, but comes from a machine. So the question becomes how we curate the experience. And in order to do that, there are many other aspects that we need to understand that live behind the object. And these solutions all have very interconnected parts. And honestly, just focusing on the user and the product feels a little inadequate when there are so many other parts to consider in this vast ecosystem. And AI is just an example. We all have ecosystems that we are designing with. So how do we even see what's there in the ecosystem? So how do we design for those complex ecosystems that are dynamic and interconnected? And we believe the first step is to visualize the system and its interconnection. So I've used a simplified example for a healthcare project to illustrate the framework from Design Unbound. The first thing is vision, right? And usually this is a very abstract imagination of the future. And what it needs is the big idea, which is to help ground the vision and let you know what's needed to make it a reality. In this case, it was to be a data provider, as there was no standardized data out there. And then, of course, you have your partners, which is really your network, right? The actual people who are going to be impacted and also going to help push the work out there and help push our work forward. But in order to do all these, right, we need the things that we always focus on, which is, the products and services, but or what they call vehicles, right? And they help to gather, analyze, synthesize, and serve that data to those partners. And if we think of our designs or products as vehicles, we will recognize that each of it has its own mechanism that helps move our big idea kind of closer to our vision. And just using the framework to lay this all out, allowed us to have a view of the ecosystem and how each of the vehicles needs to work based on their interconnections and how the data is coming in. This is another healthcare example. You can see it kind of more or less uses that framework, and this is a real one. But what it really allows us to do is to recognize that it shows the complexity of what we're working in, and it forces us to think of our solutions as interventions in this vast ecosystem to influence and curate its behavior without that direct control that we used to have. So we are seeing design as artifact evolve from a focus on objects to interventions for ecosystems. The next facet of design is design for as concept, or what we're trying to do for users. And we see it moving from getting users to make a purchase to helping users feel overall well-being. It used about, really trying to get users to make a purchase, right? And that's why we had the skin deep type of designs that was focused on the form to really encourage purchase. And then we moved to X as a service, and it was about whether users could, complete the task in an efficient and usable manner, which is important. And Figma is really a great example of this, where software is being continuously updated, optimized for tasks that users need to perform. And now we're at a point where users just aren't completing tasks on computer, right? They have a variety of devices, need to optimize for the seamless transition, interconnections, strengths of each medium. And it isn't just a single task, but can span a journey or multiple journeys where life and work are tied together. But all these solutions and technological noise has its cost, right? If you're getting notifications all day, it can kill your productivity. You have your phone all the time, it can damage your relationships. You spend too much time on social media, it can create depression. And so on the horizon, I believe the next evolution of what design needs to orient to is well-being. And I think with COVID, this has become even more important. And businesses are starting to recognize this is important, right? Pinterest is now more focused on user well-being. Numerous startups have also started looking at the repercussions of not doing this, mental health. So how do we design for well-being? Well, I mean, to be honest, among the 4 facets of design, this is probably the hardest because there's no real consensus of how well-being is defined. However, most definitions include, key attributes such as emotional, physical, social, workplace, and societal well-being. And to have overall well-being, a person needs to have well-being among all of these attributes. As designers, we're good at designing experiences that are delightful and usable in the short term, but how can we consider how designs can help users change their behaviors or support decisions that will positively impact them in the long term? And one small thing that we've started doing in our projects is sometimes to just take a moment to pause and ask ourselves and our team members, what's really the long-term impact of some of these designs that we're doing. And those small little moments of reflection have really, helped us ensure that it doesn't get forgotten. We created an app for weight loss, and really it was about building those best practices into long-term well-being habits that included growth mindset, positive psychology, and just to allow that to happen, we had to understand those basics of behavior change, right, and work with the experts to inform the work. Of course, in this example, it's a more direct application, but we believe it's possible for other projects as well. So as designers, we pride ourselves on understanding users. We're great at making things appealing, great at making things usable, but we believe we need to take this further and understand what makes people behave the way they do, and ultimately how we can affect their long-term well-being. The next facet of design we're going to explore is design as process, where we're working with others. And we're seeing the evolution of this going from just being makers to being change agents in organizations. As designers, we all love our solitude, right? To craft artifacts on our own. But then we move upstream to understand our users' goals, motivations, and tasks to be more involved in upfront decisions. And we're now at the stage where we work together with business to craft a future state, of the company or the organization through products and services. But this has resulted in designers kind of being split across the 3 worlds of artifact, user, and business. And we have numerous tools to understand our users or their reaction to artifacts, but really seem to have a dearth of tools to engage with business. Recently we've seen a surge of courses for designers to understand business models, business language, but really how do we kind of engage with business? How do we engage those diverse perspectives and social dynamics? They are very important, but working with multiple departments that sometimes have contradictory goals. A common method I'm sure many of us have used are journey maps or service blueprints that include the current state as well as the future state. And this mapping is really a powerful tool, right? But only if it brings multiple perspectives where different teams are mapping and shaping together, as those are symbiotic. Mapping helps us to synthesize, visualize, and navigate together with our departments. However, we see the next evolution as designer not just playing kind of like the passive facilitator role, but being a change agent. And what that means is that we play multiple faceted roles in mapping, right? Where we are sense making, empathizing with all the different groups that are there and what they care about. Shaping, where we are inspiring our team members with somewhat crazy ideas. And there is still this facilitation piece, but really we're there in terms of being able to broker, right, the different groups that care about different things and helping the team kind of navigate through that ambiguity together. But the heart of all this really is the storyteller piece, right? The heart, the key piece here that connects user, business, and artifacts all together in a cohesive story. We found that what we call it a decision poster, but it lives on top of maps, right? Where we call out the payoffs and trade-offs, the team that needs to be the decision maker, and the key decisions that need to be made by the different teams to move forward for the short term as well as the midterm. So need to move beyond being just facilitators, but really change agents to inspire change in our organizations. The final facet we're going to explore is design and industry, and we're seeing the evolution of this going from designers as producers to visionaries. Envision compiled a design team maturity report where they surveyed 2,200 companies to understand how better business outcomes can be fostered by design. And they found more adoption of design practices or activities, which you can see on the bottom axis, benefited business, which you can see on the left axis. And Envision identified 5 levels of maturity in design teams. The lowest level of maturity is producer teams, right? So these teams are focused only on the most visible aspects of design, the pixels on the screen. And majority of design teams, which was about 40% of the designers that were interviewed, currently design at this level. The second level of maturity is connector teams. And these teams have pixel skills of producer teams, but have developed collaborative processes and have integrated their tools with non-design peers. However, they don't typically have systems and ops for design at scale. And this is where the third level comes in, the architect teams, right? They have formalized design as a scalable function, more substantial design practices and ops to ensure design excellence across large products and product teams. And the fourth level of maturity is scientist teams. And these teams are doing data-informed design. So they are sophisticated with hypothesis, analytics, experimentation, quant research, and measuring the success of design. And the most mature and also the smallest one are what they call visionary teams. So designers at this level uses exploratory user research techniques, trends and foresight research to ensure products are good market fit. And they are heavily involved in business strategy. And one key thing that I want to call out is the use of vision artifacts, which is one piece that I'm going to go into. So how do we contribute to visionary thinking? Coming back to that, the topic that I was talking about in terms of vision artifacts, it's really a form of backcasting, right? Where we work with leadership to kind of create a vision of the future and then work backwards to figure out how to make it a reality while making sure we are kind of delivering value over time. Compared to forecasting that tends to assume the status quo continuing in its trajectory compared to taking a leap into the future in our users' future world. For us, we call it a vision type. So it's a vision and a prototype. And just to clarify, it is not a product redesign, right? The vision type is not meant to be built as is, but as a concrete and tangible manifestation of the future of the company and our users in the future as well, so that all the teams kind of know where we're heading towards. An example again from a healthcare project, on the left is the vision type, which was tested with the neurologists. Neurologists loved it. And so, we moved forward with this project. But the first thing we built really was a phone app really for those patients, which honestly is just a small little sliver of that vision type, right? This just to get that piece. And then of course we continue to build on to kind of get more and more pieces. Among the leadership, it's clear to them and what the future is and what that looks like, but adapting to the current realities and learnings of the ground. So design is expanding the more strategic roles, right? Be more like scientists that leverage data-informed design, and finally visionaries where can more successfully impact the business by working on both the future as well as the present. I know there was a lot of information to go through, so I'll just have one final recap slide here. As designers, we should recognize our role along these 4 facets of design. How we need to be scientists and visionaries as designers, being not just facilitators, but serving as change agents and moving beyond tasks and journeys to well-being, as well as designing not just objects and experiences, but ecosystems as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean, for all the great information. So perhaps we do have a few questions that have come up for Sean, but perhaps let's move to the lightning talks first. And then thanks to everyone who raised your hands, we will call on you during the open mic segment. So we would like to invite Liren now, who will talk about diversity and inclusion in UX research first. So Liren, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, we can. Can, yeah? Okay. Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Liren and I'm a UX designer with GovTech. And in today's very short session, right, I'll be sharing briefly on what is diversity and inclusion, why it's important in research, and also some personal reflections and takeaways on designing for diversity and inclusion based on a project that I've recently worked on. So what is diversity? I basically adapted this from definitions that I found online on the design report by Gensler, and it refers to diversity as all the ways in which people can differ, whether it's their culture, language, or even education. And inclusion refers to involving a variety of people, having a voice and decision-making authority. So why is this important in research? For me, right, it's because that it's necessary to include the voices and diverse experience of users early in the process so that we can understand their needs and we can also influence the design outcomes. And this is especially important in designing user-friendly solutions for a multicultural society like Singapore, right? And now I'd like to spend the bulk of today's session to share about some of my personal learnings and reflections, because I think that's the more useful bit and also the more juicy part, right, of today's sharing. And for the project that I've worked on, right, recently, it was to conduct research on a small community of foreigners working in Singapore. And they actually come from very different culture and customs. They had different language and communication abilities. And also they had different education levels and they come from different income group, which then mean that they also had different resources. So as we embark on this project itself, right, the very first challenge that we then had as a team was the limited understanding of the varying user groups who come from different culture and customs. And this actually became the first barrier for us because we did not know what research setup might then be appropriate for them. Fortunately, I was quite blessed because I had a team that could kind of complement my weaknesses. Didn't really have to rely so much on Google Translate to translate my interview guides. And some of my team members were even able to speak some of the different languages. And this actually allowed us to collect better data from the users, right? Also, we had actually had a chance to learn, to start off and learn from the experiences of people who had a pretty good knowledge of the user groups. And this helped us to quickly understand what they are like, what are some of the limitations they may then have that could influence the research that can be conducted, and also what kind of gifts will then be appropriate to thank them for their time. So personally for me, the very first key learning that I took away was that diversity itself actually starts from the team. And the team setup is important as it helps you to learn about your users quickly so that you can better plan for your research setup. The second challenge that I'd like to share today is also the challenge of engaging users with different language and communication abilities, especially if they have very different command of English, right? So that you can collect useful data when you interview them. So for our interview session, we actually did a mix of mediums where we interviewed them and got them to do also some hands-on activities. What we realized was that it was important to actually simplify some of the words and phrases we use when we ask questions during the interview, right? We realized that some of the questions that we could be asking were too broad, and that was intimidating for some of our users. So instead of asking, what do you think about this feature or touch point, we then found that it was actually easier for them to answer when we directly asked them, do you like this? And then we started to probe deeper with the following whys. Using visuals itself was also very useful in helping our users to understand what we were referring to, especially for artifacts that have very technical terms, right? And lastly, what was also interesting was that when we had hands-on activities, such as getting the users to plot their own experience, we found that it was useful in engaging users with different communication styles, especially those who tend to be a little bit more reserved, right? As this is also useful in capturing and including their input. So as a researcher, as we got them to plot their experience, we were able to then probe deeper based on what they have mapped out for us. So the second learning that I took away, right, from the project itself to include the voices, right, is to actually be open in engaging your users through different mediums in your research activities, especially if your users have very different communication abilities, because you never know, but this can actually be very useful conversation starters. And then we moved on to the very last challenge that I'd like to share in today's short 5-minute session, which is that now that you know what the research setup is going to be, what activities you're going to do, is it then ready to be rolled out to the larger group of respondents, right? Did you have any blind spots, does it matter if they come from different income groups or they have different resources? And what we learned was that it was actually important to always test with your extreme users, to always troubleshoot and refine. So what we found useful was that when we use familiar examples, it was actually quite useful in helping us to set the context and expectations of what we were going to do. Having a user guide was also useful to remove any technical barriers, such as learning how to share screen on Zoom. And also having a foolproof backup plan, right, was useful just in case things go wrong, because Murphy's Law, right, you never know what can go wrong during an interview. So during the dry run, while we asked the users to actually zoom in with their phones, right? Some of the users actually somehow ended up zooming in with us through a laptop, in which someone else had actually helped to set up for them. That is because they had a limited data plan. So they ended up not knowing how to use it because mobile literacy is not the same as computer literacy. So they didn't know how to use the trackpad. Fortunately, we prepared a foolproof backup plan where we could share our own screen and still get them to verbalize some of their thoughts with us. So we were still able to have a full session with them. So it was quite fortunate for us. So the very last learning that I'd like to share today for us to consider when we were to design for a diverse group of users, basically is to be super kiasu, test it out with your extreme users before actually rolling out to more respondents. And with that, I've come to the end of my sharing. I hope I didn't exceed any time, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Liren. Well, I never knew that there were so many considerations when it came to UX research. So now let's invite Justin, who was selected from our call for content, to share about his lightning talk. So Justin, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
great.
Can hear you.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. My name is Justin. I've only got 5 minutes of time, so I'm going to go pretty fast here. Give me 1 second to share my screen. I assume you can see my screen. So my name is Justin. I'm based in the Bay Area and I build robots. I develop robots. I'm looking to connect, collaborate, and co-create. So please contact me at justinzw@gmail.com. So I've got 3 things I want to share with you, three ideas here. I want to talk about, I really believe the new UX and UI robotics is really the personality of robotics. I'm going to show you a couple of live demonstrations that will hopefully, convince you or seed to you that idea. I want to talk about that personality in robots drive interaction. And lastly, interactions to make robots more useful. Right now, the best robot we have is a vacuum cleaner at home. We want to change that. The reason is we don't have a lot of robots at home is because everyone knows they don't really do what we want a lot of times. And with personality, we can drive interaction, which will enable them to learn better and interact with you more. And lastly, robots die when they're not used, which I've been a part of 2 startups already. People didn't use those robots. Startups died, robots died. Anyway, let's get to it. Lastly, before I go, I just created this website. I'm starting this company called rackyrobotics.com. It's just easy to remember. If you want to contact me, feel free to contact me there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my other screen. Can you guys hear me? And how do I change the administrator? How do I change the other?
Yeah, we can hear you. So you can just, on your other device, you can just share screen so that
oh no, I just want to share.
Yep.
I want the focus to be on the robots.
Yeah, okay, the focus should be on the robots already.
Okay, great. So I think everyone can see the robots here. Let me know if there's any echoes. The first robot I had was working on Misty. And one thing I want to show was that one of the best things we created was that when Misty sees your face, it has an expression, and people really like that. So that's simple personality like that really drives interaction. The other robot I work on is Jibo. And the cool thing about Jibo is that I can ask something like, hey Jibo, what's the weather?
Here's what the weather experts have for us. All signs point to clear throughout the day. Sounds like it'll be a good night sky. Warmer today.
Yes.
High at 75.
So that's one of the cool things we like to do. Drive personality, even something as simple as showing the weather. Actually, the most requested thing that people ask Jibo to do is to dance. So I'm going to ask Jibo to twerk.
All right, without any ado.
For some reason, people like robots that dance. Anyway, so I apologize if that's not PG rated. Okay, that's so. Lastly, what I'll show you is the current robot I'm working on is actually one of the most famous robots in the world. I think everyone's familiar with Boston Dynamics Spot robot. So I'm actually going to power it on. And I don't think a lot of people have seen how much personality there is in the robot. Something as simple as self-riding the robot itself, like makes it seem alive, right? And then I can do something as simple as standing. And right now I'm currently exploring things like how do I express personality in a robot? For example, if I want to do something like no, of course, that's easy, right? Then like, like yes. How about something like curiosity? Like how do you express that? And how do you make it friendly to people? So the last thing to end my 5-minute lightning talk, I'm actually going to try to make it dance, which is one of the most requested things for sport. And actually, just to let everyone know, I'm actually based in the Bay Area. And one of the things we are trying to do is actually teach classes that will help people teach sport to dance. I'm sorry, like any robotics live demo, sometimes there's a few hiccups here. And actually, if you look at the videos online, most of the viewed videos on sport is actually seeing sport dance. Okay, good. So you can see just in like something simple like that. I mean, there's no music because I'm not a music, not a music choreographer. But something simple like that shows how robots like Spot, Jibo, and then Misty, who are looking away from me, can express personality. And my goal right now is to really create personalities that drive interaction, that make robots more useful. That's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin, for the really cool talk. I didn't know that Spot could do that, but yeah. Tianyin also suggested adding a tail for Spot. So okay, at this point,
yeah, I think we'll look into that.
Yeah, okay. When it's up, please be sure to let us know about that. So at this moment, we'll be having the open mic session. I know that we have a couple of questions as well as one raised hand. So maybe I'll get Sean to address the questions first. So we have one from Leonard Chen and one from Min Lee. Leonard, would you like to verbalize your questions actually? Okay, I think Leonard is not on. If you are on here somewhere, Leonard, let us know. But for the moment, we have another question from Min Lee. So Min Lee, you are free to verbalize your question for Sean.
Hi.
Oh, Min Lee, you're breaking up a bit. Okay, for Sean, maybe I'll just read out Min Lee's question first. So the question is on the design maturity. Is it necessary to go in sequence, and can organizations go from producers to architects or visionaries? And if so, next question, how, with a smiley face?
Hi, Min Lee. I guess the key thing here is, well, I tend to work with like bigger businesses. So I would say even among the design teams, usually they are at different maturity, even across an organization. I don't think it's necessary to go in sequence, but sometimes some things are a bit harder to control. Like for example, being like having design ops, right? So that means when you start a project, you actually have people who are able to to recognize this team needs this, right? This number of people, arrange all that, get everyone, free. And so some aspects of that will, it's a bit trickier because it's something that the whole organization needs to kind of invest in, right? But I do think, like, for example, being more scientist oriented is something that you can do if you can kind of partner up with with like the data science people, right? Or and like being able to work with, for example, your PMs to figure that out, working with the data teams to kind of help you, right? Because usually if they are, for example, not assigned to you, but you can, kind of make friends with them, like, hey, can you help me out? I just need some of these answers. And usually we found like that kind of allows for some of those leaps to happen. And really it's through personal connections, right? Buying, well, I guess now it's harder to buy coffee, but just find some way to connect with them and asking them to help you. Visionary stuff, I would say also it depends on the org, right? Who you kind of report to as well. I think sometimes having access to the right people can be hard. It really depends, right? Whether you have access to the people that really are the decision makers. And so it's not that you and we found that even for like smaller scales as well, it's possible, right? To think beyond like the 2 weeks, right? A lot of times, agile, I mean, it's great, it moves things forward, but how can you maybe think a little bit further than the 2 weeks ahead as well, right? So in that way, it is a little bit of that. But if you want to go kind of bigger and probably more business strategy, you probably will need access to the decision makers, because again, I'm biased because we tend to work with bigger companies, is that by the time it goes all the way from C-suite to your PM, there has been a lot of translation across, like that has happened by the time it reach you. And then you ask, wait, why is that like that? And sometimes they may not really have the answer for that. So yeah, sorry, that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Min Lee. Great to hear from you again. Okay, we have another 2 more questions. Perhaps I will allow Shimei, who has raised his or her hand since the start of the session, to speak. Shimei, you are up. Okay, in the meantime, maybe we can direct another question that Leonard had for Sean. So just for the benefit of everyone here, I'm just going to read it out quickly. So Leonard asks, I'm thinking about long-term effects design as a concept. How do you communicate to businesses the potential negative long-term effects? For example, thinking of Facebook, Instagram's recent issues, and what is the role of design in advocating or mitigating for this?
Yeah, and I would say there are like 2 schools of thought. One is the more collaborative approach, and then there's another which is if you read Mike Monteiro, I believe. I can't remember. I can't remember the title of the book right now. But he is more like designers should be guardians, and protect the user. I'd say that I'm not as close to that. I can recognize where he's coming from, right? Where he's talking about, hey, designers maybe like they impact so many people. Maybe they need to be like doctors and lawyers and need some kind of certification, and they should stand and be the guardians and protect. I think I'm more on the collaborative side, and what I found usually helps is that even in this workshops usually that we run with leadership, just having a small kind of moment where you talk, and when you're talking about the future, you have kind of like your utopian kind of track, right? But it actually is useful to kind of think through maybe some of the dystopian aspects of that as well, right? And it's not to like, you have let's say 1 hour workshop. I don't think it's to anyone's benefit if you're going to spend half an hour on telling, like, on the dystopian aspects of it. But just making sure that it actually happens, even though it's for a short amount of time, we found at least it's still useful, right? It just keeps us in check. It's just like, oh yeah, we should think about it, because I'd say like most of my experiences, people are usually try to do good. We've not really met or we've not really worked with clients who are like, let's go get them, right? More often than not, they actually have like good in mind, and I think sometimes just there's a reminding that, hey, there are some unintended kind of consequences of our work, and just spend time to focus on that. I remember this quote as well. I think it's called "With the first ship came the first shipwreck." So right now there are 3 million shipwrecks right now in the ocean. They're just rusting away and basically polluting the water. But it doesn't mean that we don't build ships, right? Like that would also be ridiculous, right? You imagine you go like to leadership. Nope, I don't think we should build ships because they're gonna shipwreck, and we shouldn't do this. That's just not really gonna happen. So I'm more on the collaborative, just making sure the conversation happens in small pieces, and just make sure it just like lives a little bit in those conversations.
Thanks, Sean. Maybe at this point, let me invite any of our speakers who want to highlight other things from their presentations or sharings. Thanks so much for all the great info. So do our speakers have anything? Okay, I see all of the shaking heads. Thank you. So for everyone who's still online with us, thanks for staying till the end. Really, really, really appreciate that. And of course, a huge thank you to all our speakers for the candid sharing, as well as various applications of UX design. So do tell us how the webinar went by scanning the QR code on the left to give us your feedback. The link is also dropped in the chat. And also join us at the StackX Telegram group to connect with the rest of the community. And perhaps more attractive also is to be notified of when the VOD of this session will be up on the Dev portal. So all links are in the chat right now. And we hope you found this session as interesting as we did. I don't think that I've learned as much about UX and UI design before today. So that wraps up our session today. Thanks again for staying. And keep a lookout for our upcoming StackX conference on cloud in November. So yes, join us on our StackX Meetup platform and group to stay updated. Thanks, everyone.